Yellowstone National Park, United States Geological Survey, Geological Monitoring Center, January 12, 2024, 3:47 in the morning. A seismograph records a magnitude 4.2 earthquake. On the screen, it appears as a green line that jumps for 6 seconds and then returns to calm. It's not news, it's routine. That earthquake is number 2,847 of the year, and we're only 12 days into January. On another screen, GPS data shows something that most park visitors will never notice. The ground at Yellowstone has risen 25 centimeters over the last 6 years. 25 centimeters, about the height of a water bottle lying on its side. It doesn't sound dramatic. But 30 kilometers below that breathing ground, there exists a magma chamber 90 kilometers long, 50 wide, and 15 deep. The size of Manhattan, but 1,000 times deeper, and filled with molten rock at 1,200 degrees Celsius. The last time Yellowstone awoke was 640,000 years ago. It covered 2/3 of what is today the United States with a layer of ash, and the clock of its eruption cycle, according to all geological models, has already reached 0. But Yellowstone is not the only sleeping giant on the planet, and it's not the most dangerous either. There is a scale to measure volcanic eruptions. It's called the Volcanic Explosivity Index, VEI for its acronym. It was created in 1982 by 2 geologists, Chris Newhall and Stephen Self, who needed a way to compare eruptions from different eras. It's a logarithmic scale. It goes from 0 to 8, and each number represents an eruption 10 times more powerful than the previous one. To understand what that means, we need context. The Eyjafjallajökull volcano in Iceland erupted in 2010. It was classified as VEI4. It expelled 0.27 cubic kilometers of material, a quarter of a cubic kilometer, practically nothing in geological terms. But it was enough to collapse air traffic across Europe for 6 days. 100,000 flights canceled, 10 million passengers stranded, economic losses of $1.7 billion, and that was a VEI4. In 1991, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted with a VEI5 force. 10 cubic kilometers expelled in 9 hours. 847 people died. 300,000 were evacuated. Global temperatures dropped ½ degree Celsius for 2 years because sulfate particles in the stratosphere blocked some of the sunlight. A VEI5 is 10 times more powerful than a VEI4. On August 27, 1883, the Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia exploded with a VEI6 force. 25 cubic kilometers of material expelled. The explosion was heard 5,000 kilometers away. The sound waves circled the planet 7 times. 36,000 people died, most of them from tsunamis generated by the collapse of the caldera. The ash blocked so much sunlight that for 3 years, sunsets around the world turned blood red. Artists of the era painted apocalyptic skies because that's what they saw every evening. But a VEI6 is still not a supervolcano. A VEI7 expels 100 cubic kilometers or more. Regional devastation, temporary climate change, and a VEI8, the supervolcano category, expels 1,000 cubic kilometers or more. 1,000 times the Eyjafjallajökull eruption, 100 times Pinatubo, 40 times Krakatoa. According to the United States Geological Survey and International Geological Institutes, there are 20 active supervolcanoes on the planet right now. Active doesn't mean they're erupting. It means they have magma chambers of more than 1,000 cubic kilometers, and that, eventually, they will awaken again. And here's the unsettling part. Supervolcanoes don't have mountains. They're not perfect cones like Fuji or Vesuvius. They don't have visible craters smoking at the summit. They are calderas, giant depressions formed by the collapse of the terrain after the magma chamber empties. They are lakes, national parks, tourist destinations. They are invisible until they're not. Lake Taupo, Regional Devastation, New Zealand, North Island. A lake of 616 square kilometers surrounded by forests, volcanic beaches, and luxury resorts. 150,000 tourists visit it every year to fish for trout, kayak, or relax in thermal waters. What they don't see is that they're floating above a caldera 26 kilometers in diameter. 26,500 years ago, Lake Taupo erupted with a VEI-7 force. 1,170 cubic kilometers of material expelled. It didn't reach the VEI-8 threshold, but it was enough to change the geography of New Zealand forever. The eruption column reached 50 kilometers in height, 10 kilometers beyond where commercial aircraft fly. Pyroclastic flows, avalanches of molten rock and gas at 700 degrees Celsius, swept a radius of 80 kilometers. Every living being in that zone died within minutes, and then came the ash. The North Island of New Zealand was covered with a layer of ash up to 200 meters thick in some areas. 200 meters. The height of a 60-story building. The evidence is still there. Layers of ignimbrite, volcanic rock compacted by heat and pressure that geologists can see in road cuts throughout the entire island. That was a VEI-7 eruption. Total regional devastation. But there were much larger eruptions. Yellowstone, the continental catastrophe. 640,000 years ago, in what is today the northwest United States, Yellowstone awoke. It was a VEI-8 eruption. 1,000 cubic kilometers of material expelled within days. The eruption created a caldera 55 by 72 kilometers. Today, that depression is partially covered by Yellowstone Lake, one of the largest mountain lakes in North America. But the caldera is only the local scar. Yellowstone's ash covered from California to Mississippi. 2/3 of the continental territory of what is today the United States was left under a layer of ash 10 centimeters thick or more. Within a radius of 1,600 kilometers from the eruption point, the average layer was 30 centimeters. Enough to collapse roofs, kill vegetation, contaminate water sources. Geologists have identified ash deposits from the Lava Creek eruption, as that event is called, in 32 states. 32 states covered by the eruption of a single point. But even Yellowstone was not the worst supervolcano eruption. Toba, the edge of global extinction. Sumatra, Indonesia, 74,000 years ago. Lake Toba, today a tourist destination 100 kilometers long, didn't exist. In its place, there was a volcanic system that had been accumulating pressure for 840,000 years. 840,000 years. The last time it had erupted, Neanderthals had not yet evolved. But at some point in the year 73,950 BC, the Earth's crust gave way. 2,800 cubic kilometers of magma found an outlet in 9 minutes. 9 minutes. The most explosive phase of the Toba eruption, according to geological models developed in 2009, expelled 300 cubic kilometers per minute. To put that in perspective, Pinatubo expelled 10 cubic kilometers in 9 hours. Toba expelled 300 times that per minute. The eruption column reached 43 kilometers in height, 3 times the height of Mount Everest. Pyroclastic flows at 700 degrees Celsius swept 20,000 square kilometers, an area the size of Israel. And then the real catastrophe began. The ash started to fall, first locally, then regionally, then globally. In India, 2,000, 800 kilometers away, the ash formed a layer 15 centimeters thick. Geologists found that layer in sediment cores extracted in 1992. 15 centimeters of ash at 2,800 kilometers. In total, Toba's ash covered 40 million square kilometers, the equivalent of the entire Asian continent. But the visible ash was only the beginning. Microscopic sulfate particles reached the stratosphere, 30 kilometers above the Earth's surface, where there is no rain to wash them away, where they can remain suspended for years. And those particles blocked sunlight. Global temperatures dropped between 3 and 5 degrees Celsius immediately. It doesn't sound dramatic. 5 degrees. But in temperate regions, temperatures dropped an additional 10 degrees Celsius over the following 6 months. Growing seasons collapsed. 75% of plant species in the northern hemisphere entered extinction. And when the plants die, everything else follows. Herbivores died of starvation. The carnivores that depended on herbivores died afterward. Entire food chains disintegrated. This was not a regional disaster. It was a global volcanic winter that lasted between 6 and 10 years. But here is the part that nobody knew for 74,000 years. Humans almost didn't survive. University of Illinois, Department of Anthropology, year 1998. An anthropologist named Stanley Ambrose was studying something that had been puzzling geneticists for decades. Human genetic diversity is abnormally low. When scientists compare the DNA of different primate species, they find normal variations. Chimpanzees have healthy genetic diversity. Gorillas do too. Orangutans too. But humans don't. Human genetic diversity is 76% lower than that of any other great primate. 76%. It's as if all of humanity had passed through a filter. As if at some point in our past, the population had drastically reduced. Geneticists call this a population bottleneck. Ambrose decided to investigate when that bottleneck occurred. Using mitochondrial DNA analysis, which is transmitted only through the maternal line and mutates at a predictable rate, he calculated the date. 70,000 to 75,000 years ago. And then he made the connection. During that same period, the GISP-2 project, Greenland Ice Sheet Project 2, had extracted ice cores from Greenland, cylinders of ice 3 kilometers deep that contain a climate record of the last 100,000 years. And in those cores, exactly at the date of the genetic bottleneck, they found a 15-centimeter layer of ash. They analyzed the chemical composition of that ash, the geochemical signature, the proportion of elements like potassium, sodium, and silica. It matched exactly with the ashes of Toba, the same eruption, the same date. Ambrose published his findings in the Journal of Human Evolution. The title of the study was direct: Late Pleistocene Human Population Bottlenecks, Volcanic Winter, and Differentiation of Modern Humans. The conclusion was inevitable. Before the Toba eruption, the global human population was estimated at between 100,000 and 300,000 individuals. We weren't many, but we were distributed across Africa and Eurasia. After Toba, according to genetic models, the human population was reduced to between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. 3,000 to 10,000. From 300,000 to 10,000 in one generation. That is a reduction of 97%. Human groups in Eurasia disappeared completely. Only the lineages in climate refugees in Eastern Africa survived, areas where the equatorial climate partially cushioned the impact of the volcanic winter. And here is the data that changes everything. Every human being alive today, all 8 billion people on the planet, descends from those 3,000 to 10,000 survivors. It's not a theory. It's documented in our DNA. Toba was not just the largest eruption of the last 2 million years. It was the event that almost erased our species from the planet. We almost weren't here, and Toba still exists. Yellowstone, the giant under surveillance. 2024. Yellowstone National Park receives 4 million visitors a year. They come to see geysers, thermal springs, bison, bears. What they don't see is the network of 450 seismographs distributed beneath their feet. 15 GPS stations measuring ground movement with millimeter precision. INSAR satellites monitoring terrain deformation from space. Yellowstone is the most monitored supervolcano on the planet. And the data it's generating is interesting. Between 2004 and 2010, the ground of the park rose 25 centimeters. GPS stations recorded it with precision. Then, between 2010 and 2015, the ground descended 15 centimeters. And since 2016 until today, it has risen again 7 centimeters. Geologists call this caldera breathing. It's normal. It's cyclical. But normal doesn't mean harmless. Between 2013 and 2015, a team from the University of Utah used seismic tomography to map Yellowstone's magma chamber. It's the same technology doctors use to perform CT scans, but applied to the Earth's crust. What they found was unexpected. The magma chamber is 2.5 times larger than previous models had calculated, 90 kilometers long, 50 wide, 15 deep, enough magma for a VEI-8 eruption. And Yellowstone's eruption cycle is predictable. It erupts approximately every 640,000 years. The last eruption was 640,000 years ago. But before that sounds like a countdown, there's something to understand. The margin of error in geology is enormous. 640,000 years, give or take, 100,000. Being on schedule doesn't mean it will erupt tomorrow. It could be in 1,000 years, in 10,000, in 100,000, or tomorrow. We don't know. Campi Flegrei, the inhabited supervolcano Naples, Italy. 500,000 people live above an active caldera, 13 kilometers in diameter. Not near the caldera, above it. Campi Flegrei, the Phlegraean Fields, is a volcanic zone that includes neighborhoods, highways, ports, schools, and it's waking up. Since 2005, the ground has risen 85 centimeters. The measurements are made by the INGV, the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology of Italy, using permanent GPS stations, 85 centimeters in 19 years. And the acceleration is concerning. In 2023, the ground rose 15 centimeters in a single year, the fastest rate recorded in modern history. In October of 2023, 600 earthquakes were recorded in 1 month. 600. Most of magnitude less than 3, but enough to crack buildings and frighten the population. And in 2023, something unprecedented occurred. The first evacuation due to supervolcano activity in the modern era. 500 families were relocated from the Pozzuoli neighborhood, the area closest to the center of the caldera. The current alert level is yellow. On a 4-level scale: green, yellow, orange, red. Yellow means seismic activity and deformation above normal values. It requires intensified monitoring. If it reaches orange, partial evacuation plans will be activated. If it reaches red, total evacuation of 500,000 people. The last eruption of Campi Flegrei was in 1538. It was a VEI-3, relatively small. But the caldera has the potential for VEI-7, and it sits beneath one of the most densely populated cities in Europe. Lake Toba, the one that already did it. 74,000 years after almost extinguishing humanity, Lake Toba remains active. Not in the sense that it's about to erupt, but in the sense that the magma chamber below the lake is recharging. Indonesian geologists installed a regional seismic network in 2016. The data shows that the center of the lake, an island called Samosir, is rising between 4 and 8 millimeters per year. 4 to 8 millimeters. Practically imperceptible. But in geological terms, it's a sign that the magma continues to ascend from the depths. Toba's cycle is long, 840,000 years between the last two VEY8 eruptions. That means there are 766,000 years until the next one, unless the cycle is irregular, unless the models are wrong. We won't know until it happens. Lake Taupo, the irregular one. Lake Taupo in New Zealand has a chaotic eruption history. Its last major eruption was 1800 years ago, year 232 AD. It was classified as VEI5, not VEI8, but it was violent enough for Chinese writers of the Han Dynasty to record unusual reddish skies. Since then, nothing. The problem with Taupo is that its eruption cycle is unpredictable. Eruptions have occurred with intervals ranging from 900 years to 30,000 years. There is no clear pattern. GeoNet, the Geological Institute of New Zealand, monitors the caldera with a network of seismographs and GPS. So far, no signs of activation. But in geology, no signs doesn't mean safe. It means not yet. What would happen if one of these giants awoke tomorrow? In 2016, the Federal Emergency Management Agency of the United States, FEMA, carried out a simulation of a Yellowstone eruption. They used the most recent geological data, climate models developed by NOAA, economic impact projections from the Department of the Treasury. The results were published in a 300-page report that most people will never read. Here is the summary. In the first 24 hours, 90,000 deaths. Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. Zones swept by pyroclastic flows. In the first week, 2/3 of the continental United States territory covered with ash more than 10 centimeters thick. 10 centimeters doesn't sound catastrophic, but 10 centimeters of ash collapse roofs, contaminate water systems, destroy vehicle engines, make agriculture impossible. Within a radius of 1,000 kilometers from Yellowstone, infrastructure collapses completely, roads impassable, power lines brought down, communications interrupted. 75% of crops in the Midwest, the breadbasket of the United States, die in the first month. And that's only locally. Globally, the impact would be immediate. Air transport is paralyzed. Ash in aircraft engines causes catastrophic failures. All flights over North America are suspended indefinitely. Global supply chains collapse within weeks. The United States is a critical node in international trade. Without air or land transport, containers stop moving. And then comes the volcanic winter. According to climate models developed between 2012 and 2018, a VEI8 eruption from Yellowstone would reduce global temperatures by 10 degrees Celsius during the first year. 10 degrees. Growing seasons in mid-latitudes disappear. Europe, Central Asia, the northern United States, Canada. Zones that today produce 60% of global wheat and corn become unviable for agriculture. The United Nations estimated in 2015 that 2 billion people would be at risk of famine. 2 billion. Economic losses in the first year, $3 trillion. In the United States alone. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. We are not prepared. There is no coordinated international evacuation plan for a supervolcano eruption. There are no global food reserves for a volcanic winter of 6 to 10 years. Current grain reserves cover between 30 and 60 days of global consumption. There is no technology to prevent or stop an eruption. There is no relief valve. There is no way to gradually release pressure. The only thing we have is monitoring. And monitoring allows us to know, with weeks or perhaps months of advance notice, that something is going to happen. But knowing it's coming is not the same as being able to stop it. The global budget dedicated to monitoring the 20 active supervolcanoes is approximately $100 million per year. For comparison, NASA dedicates $150 million per year to planetary defense against asteroids. The probability of an asteroid larger than 1 kilometer impacting Earth in the next 100 years is 0.0001%. The probability of a supervolcano erupting in the next 100 years is approximately 1%, 1,000 times more likely. But we spend more on the less probable threat because asteroids are visible. They're in space. We can track them. Supervolcanoes are under our feet, invisible, until they're not. Supervolcanoes are not relics of the past. They are geological clocks, some with alarms programmed for every 600,000 years, others for every million, some completely unpredictable. But all of them, absolutely all of them, will awaken again. Yellowstone has been dormant for 640,000 years. Its average cycle is 640,000 years. It's on schedule. Campi Flegrei has gone 486 years without a major eruption, and the ground beneath Naples keeps rising. Toba created the largest lake in Southeast Asia and almost erased our species. And its magma chamber keeps recharging, millimeter by millimeter, year after year. Taupo has erupted 5 times in the last 30,000 years. There is no reason to think it won't do so again. The difference from 74,000 years ago is that now we are 8 billion people, not 100,000. And our civilization depends on global supply chains that a volcanic winter would destroy within weeks. 74,000 years ago, we were reduced to 10,000 survivors. But we were hunter-gatherers distributed in small groups. We could survive with stone tools and fire. Today, we are 8 billion living in cities that depend on electricity, transport, industrial agriculture. If Toba erupted today with the same force as 74,000 years ago, the consequences would not be 10,000 survivors. They would be billions trying to survive on a planet covered in ash, with temperatures 10 degrees lower, without access to food, without transport, without infrastructure. And we are not prepared. We have the knowledge. We have the monitoring. We know exactly what will happen. But we don't have the political will, nor the resources, nor the contingency plans to face it. Because the cycles of supervolcanoes operate on timescales that no human civilization has ever experienced. For us, 600,000 years is incomprehensible. It's more time than we have existed as a species. But for a supervolcano, 600,000 years is just one cycle, and the cycle always completes. The question is not whether it will happen. The question is when, and whether this time we will be more prepared than those 10,000 survivors who, unknowingly, unplanned, without even understanding what had happened, saved our species.